The smallest doe went down before the bidding even began. Her knees folded beneath her and she struck the dust hard enough to raise a pale cloud around her ribs. For one terrible moment she did not move. The other goats pressed away from her 38 thin bodies, crowded against the rails beneath the brutal July sun. Marisol Ortega gripped the fence. "Water," she said. The yard boy carrying a bucket glanced toward the auctioneer and kept walking. Across the livestock yard. Silas Barlow laughed. "Don't waste good water," he called. "That one's already halfway buried." Several men joined him. Their laughter rolled easily beneath the feed store awning where they stood in clean hats and expensive boots sheltered from the heat. Marisol pushed through the gate before anyone could stop her. Dust clung to the hem of her brown skirt. Heat gathered beneath her blouse and along the curve of her back. But she ignored it. She lowered her heavy body beside the fallen animal, one knee pressing painfully into the ground. The doe's eyes remained open. Alive then, barely. Marisol cupped her hand beneath the animal's jaw. The skin felt hot and loose. Its breath came in shallow pulls. "You planning to carry her home yourself?" Silas called. Marisol looked over her shoulder. Silas stood with 4 cattlemen near the trough, broad as a barn door, and twice as pleased with himself. His ranch covered the green bottomland west of Mora, where the Acequia water ran steadily and grass rose thick enough to hide a calf's hooves. He looked from Marisol to the goat and smiled. A woman who can hardly carry herself up Cerro Hueco ought not buy animals meant to climb it. The laughter came louder this time. Marisol felt every eye in the yard move over her full hips, thick waist, and round face. Men had looked at her that way since she was 14, as though her body had already told them everything worth knowing. She had learned not to answer every insult. Some answers cost too much breath. A shadow fell across the goat. A narrow-faced boy of 16 knelt opposite her, setting down a tin cup of water. "Slow," he whispered. "Too much will make her choke." Marisol recognized him from the pens. Mateo Lujan. He slept wherever someone allowed him and worked wherever someone paid. Together they wet the doe's mouth. After several attempts, the animal swallowed. "Will she live?" Marisol asked. "Through the hour, maybe." Mateo glanced toward the auctioneer. "Longer if somebody feeds her." The auction bell rang. "Clear the pen," the auctioneer shouted. Marisol stood slowly. Pain moved through her knees, but she kept her face still. Tomas waited beside the fence, his hat pulled low. He held 3 folded dollar bills in one hand. "That money was for flour," he said quietly. "I know. And lamp oil. I know that too." The goats shifted as the auctioneer climbed onto the rail. They were a mixed herd. Old as young females, several half-grown kids. Ribs showed beneath dusty coats, but their eyes remained alert. One dark-eared doe stood near the back, watching Marisol, with an expression so steady it felt almost judgmental. "Whole pen," the auctioneer called. 39 head. Who'll give me $8? No hands rose. 5 silence. Silas turned his back, already bored. Mateo moved close to Marisol. 14 of the does have milk in them. Not much now. They've been underfed. You're certain? I milked 3 yesterday. They belonged to nobody since the trader died. Men who brought them here haven't fed them proper in weeks." The auctioneer wiped his forehead. $3. Somebody give me $3 and take the trouble away. A memory moved through Marisol. She was 12 again, standing in Tia Inez's stone cellar south of Las Vegas. Wheels of pale cheese rested on wooden shelves. The room smelled of salt milk and cold earth. Inez had kept goats because cattle could not survive on her broken hill country. She made hard cheese for traders going north where fresh milk spoiled before reaching the mining camps. Marisol remembered the pressing stones, the cloth, the dark shelves, not the measurements, not enough to save a ranch, but perhaps enough to begin. She raised her hand. $3. The yard changed. Not silent. Cattle still bawled in the adjoining pens. A mule kicked against a wagon board. But every nearby conversation thinned. Tomas closed his eyes briefly. The auctioneer stared at her. $3 for the whole pen, yes. Silas turned around. For the first time that afternoon, he was not laughing. Then his mouth curved again. "You're buying 39 ways to lose your farm faster." Marisol faced him. "Then you should be grateful they are no longer your concern." The auctioneer looked around once. Sold. The word landed harder than a gunshot. By the time the goats were loaded, Marisol's hands were scratched and her blouse was wet with sweat. 2 younger animals had to be lifted into the second wagon. The weak doe lay wrapped in an old blanket near the front. A woman approached while Marisol secured the rope gate. She wore a faded blue shawl despite the heat and carried dried plants tied in small bundles. Marisol knew her by sight, Rosa Candelaria, a Jicarilla widow who traded through the mountain settlements. Rosa pulled back the blanket and examined the doe's mouth. She needs salt warm water and ground pinyon meal. Can you prepare it? I can. Marisol asked the price. Rosa named an amount that would have left nothing for the journey home. Marisol touched the silver shawl pin at her collar. It had belonged to her mother. She removed it. Rosa looked at the pin, then at Marisol. Once traded, it is traded. I understand. Rosa accepted it and handed her 2 herb packets. I'll come to your place at sunrise. If these animals are to live tonight, cannot be wasted. The wagons left Mora beneath a white, pitiless sky. Mateo walked behind with a stick, keeping the weaker goats moving. Tomas drove the first wagon in silence, while Marisol held the reins of the second. They passed irrigated cornfields, adobe homes, and Silas Barlow's long green pasture. Then the road began climbing. The land changed quickly. Grass thinned, stone pushed through the soil, thornbrush crowded the hillsides. Tomas finally spoke. 39 goats cannot erase $412 of debt. No. You don't know how to make the cheese you're thinking about. Not yet. He turned toward her. Marisol, one of the goats, stretched its neck over the wagon rail and tore a mouthful from a thorn bush as they passed. Then another did the same. Marisol looked up at Cerro Hueco, brown and rough beneath the sun, the land everyone in the valley had called useless. That hill isn't barren. We've just been asking it to feed the wrong animal. Tomas followed her gaze. She told him the rest. The goats would clear the brush. The does would give milk once they recovered. Hard cheese could survive the mountain road. Mining camps paid dearly for food that did not rot in a wagon. And if it fails, he asked. Marisol tightened her hands around the reins. Then it will be one more thing that failed after we tried it. They reached the ranch near sundown. 4 goats escaped before the wagons were fully unloaded. Mateo and Tomas chased them toward the upper fence, while Marisol carried the weak doe into the barn. Her arms trembled beneath the animal's weight, but she did not put her down. She mixed Rosa's herbs with warm water and pinyon meal, then held the cup beneath the doe's mouth. Outside, goats cried, boards cracked, and Tomas shouted Mateo's name. The doe refused the mixture. Marisol tried again. Come on, she whispered. I spent my mother's silver on you. The doe swallowed, only once. Then again. Marisol sat back on the dirt floor. Through the barn door, she saw the dark-eared goat standing on a black rock above the yard. Behind her, the slope rose wild and tangled toward the evening sky. Not saved, not useful yet, but alive. After dark, Tomas found an envelope beneath the farmhouse door. The bank seal was pressed into the paper. Marisol read the notice at the kitchen table while the herd called from the pen. Edwin Rusk required a substantial payment within 90 days. Without it, the bank would begin proceedings against Cerro Hueco. Tomas stood behind her silent. Marisol pulled a clean sheet of paper toward the lamp. She dipped the pen into the ink. Dear Tia Inez, I need you to tell me everything I was too young to learn. The goats began screaming before dawn, not 1 or 2, all 39 of them. The sound tore through the adobe walls and pulled Marisol upright before she understood where she was. Beside her, Tomas reached for his trousers while something struck the side of the barn, hard enough to rattle the shutters. Marisol was already moving. She stepped into the cold blue light and found the water trough overturned, 7 goats outside the north fence, and Mateo asleep against a post with a coil of wire across his lap. One of the young animals stood over him, chewing the edge of his sleeve. Mateo. He woke so quickly that his head struck the post. I was watching them. They appear to have been watching you. Another crash came from the barn. The pregnant doe had wedged herself between 2 boards and was kicking in panic. Marisol pushed inside, planted her boots in the straw, and wrapped both arms around the animal's middle. Tomas pulled the board. He pried it loose with a crowbar. The doe lurched free, driving Marisol backward against the wall. Pain flashed through her hip. She held on until the animal stopped fighting. By sunrise, her skirt was torn. Mateo had retrieved 5 of the escaped goats, and Tomas had repaired enough of the fence to make it temporarily respectable. Rosa Candelaria arrived carrying 2 leather bags and took in the yard without surprise. You bought goats, she said. Now they are behaving like goats. She spent the morning moving through the herd with steady hands. She showed Marisol how to check the color beneath an eyelid for weakness, how to smell a goat's breath for sickness, and how to press the flesh near the spine to judge whether an animal was gaining condition. Adaptable does not mean indestructible, Rosa said. People confuse those things. The weakest doe from the auction was still alive. She drank without help, now though her legs trembled when she stood. Matteo named her Loose. Marisol pretended not to hear him do it. Within 10 days, the hillside began to change. The goats stripped rabbit brush from the lower slope. They pushed through thorn scrub that had torn cattle hide and defeated every tool Tomas owned. They climbed volcanic stone with a sure-footed ease that made the land appear less steep beneath them. Narrow paths emerged. Then an old terrace wall appeared beneath the weeds. Marisol stood with a milk pail against her hip and looked at the exposed stones. She would not call what she felt hope. Hope had cost her too much in the cattle years. She called it evidence. The does gave little milk at first. 14 could be milked, but most produced no more than a cup or two. Marisol carried the pails down the slope each morning, heat gathering beneath her blouse as the sun rose. Matteo reached for both buckets one day. "I can carry them." "So can I. You're breathing hard. The hill is steep." He hesitated. Marisol handed him one pail. "Help, because the work is heavy. Do not help because you think I'm helpless." Matteo nodded and took it without another word. Tia Inés's reply arrived folded into 6 pages. Her handwriting was small and severe. She listed temperatures, amounts, waiting times, and the proper appearance of curd at every stage. She explained how to salt the wheel, how to turn it, and how to keep the cellar cool without allowing moisture to settle on the rind. At the bottom of the final page she had written, "Your first wheels will fail. Begin anyway." Tomas cleared the old stone room beneath the house. He repaired the rear channel where a sequia water passed through the wall before returning to the lower garden. Matteo built shelves from cedar boards. Rosa secured rennet and coarse salt through a merchant in Las Vegas. Marisol began with 4 gallons of milk. The first curd never set. She waited an hour longer than Inés instructed, then another. The milk remained thick but useless. "Too warm," she said. Tomas looked at the thermometer. Or too much rennet. Too warm. She poured it into the pig trough. The second wheel held its shape. When Marisol cut into it 3 days later, the center was wet and soft. The third developed a sour odor before the end of the week. The fourth cracked beneath the pressing board. Each failure consumed milk, salt, wood, cloth, and time. Tomas began writing numbers on the back of an old feed receipt. Marisol watched him add the cost of rennet. "You can stop doing that. I need to know what we are spending. I know what we are spending. Then tell me how many more batches we can lose." The room went still. Marisol wiped her hands on her apron. "You think Silas was right. I did not say that. You do not have to." Tomas laid down the pencil. "I think you have slept 3 hours in 2 days. I think you climb that hill until your knees shake, and then you stand over this stove until midnight. I think you would work yourself into the grave before admitting you need help." "I asked Inés for help. You asked a woman 40 miles away. I'm standing in the room." Marisol looked at him. He was not angry. That made it worse. Tomas pushed the receipt toward her. "I cannot help carry a plan you will not let me understand." The following morning, she gave him every page of Inés's instructions. He measured the pressing stones and discovered they were nearly twice as heavy as Marisol believed. He began recording milk yield, temperature, cutting time, and salt by batch. Matteo marked each wheel with the date. The work became theirs. Inés's second letter arrived 9 days later. She answered Marisol's questions plainly. The curd was being cut too early. The weight was being applied too quickly. Moisture was being forced out before the cheese had formed enough structure to hold together. Near the end, Inés had written one sentence by itself. "Failure is only waste if you refuse to learn what it cost you." Marisol read it aloud. Tomas leaned over the table and studied the ruined batch notes. "We paid dearly," he said. "Then we should learn dearly." The fifth wheel held. It leaned slightly to one side and a crease from the cloth marked the rind, but when Marisol pressed her palm against it, the surface pushed back firm and even. She carried it into the cellar. Tomas followed. "Does this mean it worked?" "It means it has not failed yet." "What do we call that?" Marisol placed the wheel on the shelf. Inventory. 2 more wheels followed, then a fourth. Rosa tasted a slice from the earliest one and chewed slowly. "This will travel. To where Elizabethtown, maybe Baldy. The miners eat beans, hard bread, salt meat, and whatever survives the wagon road. Fresh milk never reaches them." She knew a freight operator in Las Vegas named Amos Pike. "I will take you to him," Rosa said. "If he buys, I am paid for opening the road," Fairly Marisol said. Rosa gave one approving nod. Before they could leave, Silas Barlow rode to Cerro Hueco. He admired the cleared hillside as though the transformation had occurred for his benefit. His eyes moved from the goats to the cheesecloth drying beside the house. I hear your father's Acequia share was never properly transferred, he said. It was transferred. Perhaps. Old records can be uncertain. He smiled before riding away. Marisol watched him until the dust settled. 3 days later, she and Rosa brought 2 wheels to Amos Pike's freight yard. Pike cut one open, studied the pale interior, and tasted it. Then he cut another piece, then a third. I'll take 6 wheels, he said, 11 days from now. He signed the order. Marisol had just folded it into her pocket when hoofbeats entered the yard. Mateo slid from a sweating horse with a county envelope in his hand. Silas filed against the Acequia. Marisol opened the notice. Water access could be suspended while the county reviewed the claim. She placed the document beside Pike's signed order. He waited, she said, until we had something worth destroying. The root cellar felt wrong before Marisol saw the water. She descended with the lamp held low, expecting the usual cool breath of stone and damp earth. Instead, warm air touched her face. A thin line of moisture shone along the rind of the oldest wheel. Marisol set down the lamp and pressed her fingers against the rear wall. The stones were nearly dry. Tomas. He came down the steps carrying a wrench, Mateo close behind him. The channel has slowed, Marisol said. Tomas crouched beside the narrow opening where Acequia water should have passed behind the wall. Only a weak thread moved through it. The head gate, he said. Somebody closed it part way. Mateo's face changed. I saw riders near the ditch road before dawn, who I could not see their faces. He swallowed. One horse looked like Mr. Barlow's gray. Tomas stood so quickly that his shoulder struck a shelf. I'll ride down there and say what Marisol asked, that his men touched our water. You cannot prove they did. I can make him understand what happens if they do it again. That is what he wants. Tomas stared at her. He wants you angry in his yard, she said. He wants witnesses who will remember your threats and forget what happened to the head gate. Another bead of moisture appeared on the cheese rind. Tomas looked at it, then back at her. He cannot take a recorded water right. Marisol lifted the wheel carefully and carried it toward the coldest corner. He does not have to steal our water forever. He only has to keep it from us until the cheese dies. The words quieted all 3 of them. 6 wheels stood on the shelves. 11 days remained before Amos Pike's freight wagons left for Elizabethtown. If the cellar warmed, the rinds would soften. Moisture would invite mold. Pike would open the crate, see spoiled cheese, and never buy from Cerro Hueco again. The bank would hear of it soon after. By sunrise, Tomas and Mateo had filled every available barrel. They soaked wool blankets and hung them along the rear wall. Marisol turned the wheels twice before breakfast, wiping away moisture with clean cloth. Rosa arrived carrying salt and found them working in silence. She examined the channel. This is not drought, she said. Water does not forget how to run during one night. Marisol showed her the county notice. Rosa read it slowly. You will need more than your father's deed. I have the Acequia ledger. You will need memory too. The county office in Las Vegas occupied 2 rooms above a dry goods store. Esteban Vigil, the clerk, had once served as mayordomo for an Acequia south of Mora. He knew every kind of argument people made when water became scarce or valuable. He read Silas's complaint without expression. He says your father's share was attached to livestock watering and household use, Esteban said. His attorney argues that cheese production is a new commercial use. The goats drink less than the cattle we used to keep. That is true. It is also not the argument he is making. Marisol placed her father's deed on the desk. Beside it, she laid maintenance receipts showing years of labor contributed to the communal ditch. Tomas had found them wrapped in cloth inside the old tin box. Esteban examined the signatures. The transfer appears proper. Then reject the complaint. I cannot reject it without review. How long? 30 days. Perhaps more. Marisol thought of the warm cellar. I do not have 30 days. Rosa stepped forward and placed 3 worn trade books beside the deed. My husband's family watered animals at the Ortega place before Barlow bought his first acre in Mora Valley, she said. The route is written here, dates, loads, names. Esteban opened one book. These are trade records. They are memory with ink on it. He turned several pages. Rosa pointed to repeated entries for Cerro Hueco salt delivered hides, received mules, watered meals purchased. The channel served ranchers, farmers, and travelers, she said. It was never only a pipe for one family. Esteban looked from Rosa to Marisol. There is a provision allowing continued use if suspension would cause immediate harm to an existing agricultural operation. Enter it, Marisol said. It does not guarantee approval. I do not need a guarantee. I need the water to keep moving. He copied the request into the county ledger, stamped the response, and gave Marisol a receipt. The provisional protection arrived 2 days later. The channel continued running. No one touched the headgate again. They still slept lightly. Marisol and Rosa left for Pike's Yard before dawn with 12 wheels packed in straw. 6 were older stock. 4 had reached the minimum aging time. 2 were younger than Marisol liked. At the creek crossing, one wagon wheel dropped into a washed-out rut. The crate shifted hard enough to knock Rosa against the sideboard. Marisol climbed down into knee-deep water. Mud pulled at her boots while she and Rosa lifted the axle with a fence rail. By the time they reached Las Vegas, the sun stood high and the waxed wheels felt warmer than they should. Amos Pike met them beside his loading barn. "You brought 12. You asked for 6. I did." Marisol unwrapped the youngest wheel and cut through the wax seal. The rind beneath it was dry. She pressed her thumb into the surface. Firm. Pike cut a piece and tasted it. "I'll take all 12. His camp foreman Devers Hale would decide whether the miners wanted more. "If they do not buy it," Pike said, "I do not order again. I understand." He signed the receipt. Marisol folded it beside the county filing. 3 days later, Edwin Rusk summoned her and Thomas to the bank. He read every paper she placed before him. Pike's orders, the milk logs, the batch records, Rosa's root agreement, the acequia protection, and Tomas's table of projected production. "You included failed batches," Rusk said. "They happen. Most people remove bad numbers when asking a bank for time. Bad numbers do not disappear because I dislike them." Rusk leaned back. After a long silence, he opened his ledger. 90 days, he said. "At the end of that period, I require at least $150 against the principal." Marisol had calculated the same number the night before. Agreed. The first pressing board cracked 4 days later. 2 young does developed a cough. Their breeding had to be delayed. Marisol recalculated the expected milk and found them nearly $30 short. Tomas built a heavier board from cedar. Rosa treated the sick animals. Mateo delivered smaller wheels to 2 local families willing to pay cash. Still, the gap remained. Then Amos Pike rode into Cerro Hueco 17 days after the freight run. He did not dismount before speaking. Devers sold 6 wheels in the first week. Men began trading slices among themselves. 2 camps sent riders, but there was nothing left. Marisol held the gatepost. "How many do you want?" 14 on the next run. "More after that if the quality holds." He handed her a signed order. That afternoon, another rider arrived with the county decision. The acequia transfer was valid. Silas's complaint had no sufficient grounds. The water right would remain untouched. Marisol placed the notice inside the tin box beside Pike's receipts and Inez's letters. Then she spent $4 they could barely spare to enter her best 2 wheels in the territorial agricultural exhibition. A prize could place Cerro Hueco before merchants she would never reach alone. 3 weeks before the exhibition, she sealed the chosen wheels in wax and carried them into the coldest corner of the cellar. Mateo called from above. "Marisol." She climbed the steps. Silas Barlow stood alone at the gate. No lawyer waited behind him. No foreman held his horse. He looked past her toward the cleared hillside. Then he removed his hat. "I came to ask you for something," he said. Silas Barlow stood outside the gate with his hat in both hands. For several seconds, neither he nor Marisol spoke. Behind her, goats moved across the cleared hillside, their bells sounding faintly among the rocks. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over ground that had once been hidden beneath thorn scrub. Silas looked older than he had at the auction, not weaker, not smaller, simply less certain. "I have 3 sections of land west of my upper pasture," he said. "Rocky ground. Cattle lose weight every season I put them there." Marisol waited. "I thought the land was poor. It is poor cattle land." He nodded as though the distinction had cost him something. "I want you to show me what you did here." Tomas stood near the barn, close enough to hear. Mateo remained beside the house, holding a feed sack against his chest. Neither moved. Marisol looked at Silas's expensive boots, then at the hillside behind him. The water complaint was meant to break Pike's order. Silas did not look away. "Yes. You knew the acequia record was valid. My attorney believed he could delay the decision, and while he delayed it, my cheese would spoil." "Yes." The plainness of the answer struck harder than an excuse would have. Silas tightened his hands around the hat. "I knew you were desperate at the auction. I knew those goats were probably the only animals you could afford. I said what I said because the men around me would laugh." Marisol felt the old heat rise beneath her ribs. He continued before she could answer. "I wanted you to feel foolish. The water filing was worse. That was not ranching. It was not competition. It was mean. The words settled between them. Marisol had imagined this moment many times, though never honestly. In those imaginings, Silas begged. She humiliated him. The whole valley watched. Now there was only dust goat bells and a tired man holding his hat. You laughed because you thought worth had to look like something you already owned. Silas's jaw tightened. Marisol stepped closer to the gate. Cattle like your cattle, land like your land, men with your money. Anything else looked worthless to you, I know that now. No, you know you were wrong. That is not always the same thing. He accepted the words without protest. I'm asking anyway, he said. I will pay. Marisol looked toward the cellar door. The exhibition is in 3 weeks. The bank deadline comes after that. I will answer when those matters are settled. Silas replaced his hat. That is fair. It is not fairness. It is time. He mounted and rode away. 2 mornings later, 3 goats stopped eating. Rosa found the first coughing behind the upper shelter. By noon, 2 more had developed wet noses and shallow breathing. She separated them while Mateo scrubbed buckets and Tomas rebuilt a section of the kidding pen. The warm weather made the cellar harder to manage. The new pressing board shifted under weight, leaving one wheel uneven. A merchant in Las Vegas sent word asking for 6 additional wheels before the exhibition. Marisol refused. We could use the money, Tomas said. We could lose the name before we have properly earned it. They may buy elsewhere. Then they buy elsewhere. I will not send soft cheese and ask them to forget what it tasted like. Tomas looked at the crooked pressing board. That evening he took it apart. He worked past midnight shaving the braces, resetting the crosspiece, and adding a guide that kept the pressure centered. In the morning he placed a production table beside Marisol's coffee. I moved the smaller batches to alternate days, he said. We can fill Pike's order and keep the exhibition wheels untouched. She studied the numbers. The plan was careful, better than hers. Tomas leaned against the table. I spent too long waiting for you to prove the plan before I treated it as ours. Marisol reached across and pressed her hand over his. Then, do not wait any more. They left for Las Vegas before dawn on the 2nd Saturday of September. The fairground spread across a dusty field filled with sheep pens, chili displays, cattle stalls, wool merchants, and canvas pavilions. Hispano families arrived in wagons. Pueblo traders arranged pottery beside baskets of corn. Freightmen moved through the crowd, studying anything that might sell beyond the mountains. Marisol placed her 2 wheels on a white cloth. One remained whole. She cut the second to reveal the firm, pale interior. A small card read, Cerro Hueco aged goat cheese, Mora Valley, aged 9 weeks. The judge was Abigail Boone, a narrow-faced dairywoman from the eastern plains. She asked no questions about debt-starving goats or water rights. She smelled the rind, pressed the surface, cut a thin piece, then another. She returned twice before the judging ended. Tomas watched her from beside a lemonade stand. You are staring. I'm studying the crowd. The crowd is behind you. He turned around without embarrassment. The results were posted at 2. Marisol approached the board slowly because hurrying could not alter the ink. First place in preserved dairy belonged to Cerro Hueco. Beneath the listing, Abigail Boone had written exceptional rind, consistent texture, strong flavor, suitable for summer freight and regional distribution. Marisol read the words 3 times. Mateo shouted before remembering where he was. Rosa placed one hand on his shoulder, though her own smile was visible. Amos Pike arrived before Marisol had collected the certificate. I want a standing order, he said. 14 wheels per run now. 24 by spring. A Las Vegas merchant requested local supply. Another freight operator asked Rosa about northern camps. She named her commission before allowing him to finish. By sunset, the 2 prize wheels had brought more orders than Cerro Hueco could immediately fill. The money came in pieces. Pike's payment, 4 exhibition sales. The merchant's deposit, direct purchases from Mora families. 2 of the buyers had laughed in the auction yard. Marisol charged them the same price as everyone else. She offered neither punishment nor kindness, only the correct weight and the correct price. After returning home, she sent word to Silas. One day each month, she told him when they met, $2 per visit. Cash. You do not use my name to sell anything. You do not interfere with my buyers or the acequia. What I teach you remains my knowledge to teach elsewhere. Silas nodded. Agreed. 30 days later, Marisol placed $173 on Edwin Rusk's desk. He counted it carefully. The required payment is $150. Apply the rest to the principal. Rusk entered the amount into his ledger and gave her the receipt. Outside, Tomas waited beside the wagon. "Paid?" he asked. "Paid." The breath left him slowly. They drove home through Mora Valley past Silas's green fields and the auction yard where the goats had once stood starving in the dust. At Cerro Hueco, Mateo closed the upper gate. Rosa secured 2 cheese crates to her mule for the northern road. Tomas carried the exhibition certificate into the house and placed it inside the tin box with Inez's letters, the Acequia decision, Pike's contract, and the bank receipt. Marisol descended into the cellar. She turned each wheel by hand. Above her, the goats moved across the hillside, uncovering more stone, more grass, more of the land's true shape. Nothing was finished. The debt remained. Winter would come. Animals would fall sick, orders would grow faster than milk, but the work no longer felt like a sentence. It had become a direction. Marisol climbed the steps into the evening light. The goats had not made the land easy. They had taught her what it was for.